All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er video. Pro Football Focus says Diamador Lenore is the most underrated 49er. We'll discuss if that is indeed the case and who else belongs on that underrated list in 49er land. We'll discuss that coming up next. But first, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville and Corte Madera, and they're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out, and they do run out. So get there early. Go say hi to Damon and Mary. Tell them the Krug sent you. Get the brisket chili. The potato chips cooked in the beef fat, which you can only get in Marin County, are also second to none. But go say hi to Damon and Mary and tell them that I sent you, that Larry Krueger sent you. All right. I was reading today that Pro Football Focus lists the 49ers' most underrated player as Diamador Lenore. And Lenore this year had a 75.8 Pro Football Focus grade, which was quite a bit better than what he did last year. That was 23rd among cornerbacks in the league. So it's not like he's the best corner in football or anything, but a lot of people feel that he's incredibly underrated. It made me think, who exactly are the underrated players on the 49ers? Who are the most underrated guys on the team? And to me, I think there's 5 guys that really stand out as underrated players. I'm going to start on special teams. George Odom. You talk about, Pro Bowl and all-pro players. People forget George Odom is an all-pro special teamer. He is a phenomenal coverage player. This guy will go down and make huge plays on special teams. When the Niners didn't have him, they missed him. When they got him back, he immediately made an impact. He's a huge, huge difference maker on special teams. We always give special teams the lip service. It's a third of the game. But then when it comes time to ranking players and their value, guys who do it on special teams don't get the same credit. They just aren't valued at the same level as great offensive players or great defensive players. And I understand it, but then I'd have to push back and say, well, is special teams really a third of the game if the great special teams players in the league aren't considered great? If you say great safeties, people are going to name all kinds of guys. They're never going to say George Odom, but George Odom is an all-pro special teamer and a decent safety to boot. Now, he doesn't play a lot from scrimmage, but he can. But he's really a difference maker on special teams. So to me, George Odom is definitely one of the more underrated Niners. I didn't think that until he went out with the injury last year, and then you realized how barren the Niners special teams coverage units were without him. So no doubt, George Odom's on my list. He's one of the most underrated Niners. I'm going to go with a couple offensive linemen. I think Aaron Banks is a very underrated player. Banks does not give up a lot of pressure. He's solid run blocker. I think he's an above average pass protector. He's a big, wide bodied guy who he plays all the games. I mean, he's rarely hurt. We're talking about 6'5", 325. He's a great athlete at that size. If you could see Aaron Banks, dribbling the basketball, and the Niners have a bucket in their locker room. If you could see him shooting in the locker room, you'd be like, oh man, this guy's a great, incredible athlete. He really is. And he was a pretty good basketball player, I guess, in high school in El Cerrito. But, you talk great offensive linemen. Nobody ever says anything about Banks, but that's kind of what a great offensive lineman does. You don't notice him. You don't notice him when he's there. And Banks is really, really underrated. So I think he's going to get paid in free agency at some point. Then he probably will no longer be underrated. But I think Aaron Banks, definitely a really underrated player. Just quietly goes about his business, 6'5", 320. He's a rock on their O-line. Another really underrated player is John Feliciano. And I know there are people that don't like Feliciano because he called out Burford and they think he's a bad teammate and this and that. But John Feliciano is a veteran of the NFL trench wars, and this guy can be plugged in at either guard spot or center, and he will play at a very high level. He played at an exceptionally high level last year, when he played guard for the Niners at right guard. So Feliciano, I think, has been one of the most underrated players on every team he's ever been on in the NFL. He wasn't a high draft pick out of Miami, and yet he has started for Buffalo, the Raiders, the Giants, and now the Niners. And if you look at what the impact that he made when he did start, this guy's assignment sound. He can handle big, powerful players at the point of attack. He's got enough movement ability to play multiple schemes, including the outside zone run scheme. Feliciano, I think, is a very underrated player. If you say, stalwart Niners, people would name 30 guys before they ever got to Feliciano. And yet Feliciano is a great locker room guy. He's a tough guy. He's a smart guy. He's a versatile player. I think he's really underrated. And he's valuable to have on the team because if Brendel goes down, he's the fill-in. If Banks goes down, he's the fill-in. If Burford can't do the job, he's the starter at right guard. I mean, this guy gives you that security blanket against the interior rushers that this league has. And Feliciano, in my mind, totally underrated. All right, a couple guys on offense I think are really underrated. Elijah Mitchell. Elijah Mitchell has been hurt a lot, but it's funny. People say, well, Shanahan doesn't trust him. No, Shanahan trusts him a lot. Shanahan, in his ideal world, would use McCaffrey in the first half, get a 10-point lead, and then just put the ball in Mitchell's hands. Why? Because Mitchell does not fumble the ball. I think he had one fumble in college. He doesn't fumble. He does not fumble in big games. He has two hands on the rock. He's got great instincts as a runner between the tackles. He's just a very underrated player. Now, the Niners struggled to run block last year, so he wasn't quite as effective. But to me, Elijah Mitchell, I mean, he knows the offense. He can catch it out of the backfield. He can run between the tackles. He has very few negative yardage plays, and he doesn't fumble. And yet, if you talked about useful NFL running backs, people would name 50 guys before they got to Elijah Mitchell. So to me, he's very, very underrated. And I would say the most underrated 49er has got to be Juwan Jennings. Juwan Jennings, with the money on the table, is an all-pro. You put the money on the table and that guy rises to the occasion. You need a 3rd and 10 play to keep a drive alive against Dallas. Boom. He runs a 12-yard out. He catches the ball, gets both feet down. First down, offense stays on the field. You need a big play against Green Bay to keep the drive alive. Juwan Jennings. Brock Purdy floats a pass against, I think it was Green Bay, in the middle of the field. Could have been picked. Juwan goes up, plays defensive back, fields everybody away from the ball, makes the catch. Juwan Jennings is a big money player. The Niners have maybe one of the best collections of weapons in all of pro football. You got Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel. Now you've got other guys like Jacob Cowing and Ricky Pearsall. I mean, they got weapons, man. They got all kinds of weapons. And yet, if you ask Niner fans, it's 3rd and whatever, and you need to get a first down or with your season on the line, who do you want to throw it to? I would say most Niner fans might say Juwan Jennings. And what does that say? You got all these awesome high-powered, weapons who are all pros and pro bowlers, and yet with the money on the table, with the season hanging in the balance, Niner fans trust, 3rd and Juwan. They trust Juwan Jennings. So he was a restricted free agent. The Niners, look like they're going to be able to keep him for at least one more year. He'll be a free agent at the end of the year, and he'll probably walk away for a bigger payday elsewhere, especially with, Deebo and Ayuk and also being free agents, and the Niners kind of, in the back end of their Super Bowl window in the minds of many. But Juwan Jennings is valuable, and he's really, really underrated. And if you said, man, big money receivers, and you had this discussion on a national sports talk show, and you were asking people who are the big money wide receivers in the NFL, man, you'd have 50 names mentioned before you'd hear Juwan Jennings, and he might be the biggest big money receiver there is. When the money is on the table and you got to have it, this guy delivers. And so for my money, that makes him very, very underrated. So there you go. Pro Football Focus's Demo Lenore. I also think he's underrated as well. He's good against the run. He's good against the pass. He gets nothing but better and better and better and better. He can play inside, outside. He's very, 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 very versatile, tough. There's a lot to love about Demo Lenore. And I would say he is underrated. But I would say that the most underrated 49ers are Aaron Banks, Elijah Mitchell, John Feliciano, Jawan Jennings. These are the guys that are super, super underrated. And nobody talks about them. Nobody talks about Banks or Mitchell or Feliciano or Jennings. Nobody talks about how underrated those players are. They just go do their thing, and nobody seems to notice. So there you go. My underrated 49ers. If I got to go most underrated, I'm going JJ. I'm going Jawan Jennings. If you got to have it, and you got to find somebody to do it for you on a key third down, man, Jawan will be there, and you know it, and you just know it. And he does it time and time again, and to me, he is the most underrated 49er. All right, thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to Marin Auto Glass for sponsoring this video, and thanks to the rest of you for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube.